Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in your life when you no longer bow to chaos. You no longer chase approval. You no longer beg for clarity from confusion. And in that moment, you become dangerous to the manipulator. Because when a narcissist sees that you're no longer dependent on their praise, their presence, or their poison, they don't just walk away. No, they launch one final attack, one last dirty trick. And if you're not aware, if you're not rooted, you might just fall for it. They sense you've outgrown them. You can always tell when someone has outgrown a season because they no longer fit the frame they used to live in. There comes a point in your journey where the lies no longer sound like truth. The manipulation no longer feels like love. The chaos no longer passes for passion. And when that moment comes, when your soul awakens, you begin to walk different, think different, and speak different. That's when the narcissist takes notice. They don't notice you because they miss you. They notice you because they lost control over you. Because for them, relationships are not sacred, they're strategic. Narcissists don't thrive in mutuality. They thrive in imbalance. They require you to be beneath them emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And the moment you rise, you disrupt their entire game. You see, you used to walk on eggshells. You used to apologize for things that weren't your fault. You used to bend so far backwards just to keep the peace that you lost your own shape in the process. But now you stand tall. Now you ask questions. Now you speak up. Now you say no and mean it. Now you recognize silence is not power, gaslighting is not logic, and triangulation is not love. And when a narcissist sees this, they feel exposed because your strength reveals their weakness. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your clarity threatens their confusion. They don't want a partner, they want a puppet. And once the strings break, they panic. Make no mistake, your evolution is their crisis. Because a narcissist isn't just losing you, they're losing access. Access to your compassion, your time, your attention, your energy. And let me tell you something, narcissists don't value people. They value access to power sources. And now you've become unplugged. You've reconnected to a higher power, something deeper than approval, something stronger than fear. You've tapped into truth, and truth has a voice. And here's the beautiful part. You didn't become arrogant, you became aware. You didn't become cold, you became conscious. You didn't stop caring, you stopped sacrificing yourself for someone who only showed up when it served them. That shift, the one deep in your soul, is the very thing a narcissist cannot manipulate. Because when a person no longer needs you, they become unshakable to you. And that's what scares them. The final trick. And listen closely, because this is where most people fall back into the trap. When the narcissist realizes their usual weapons no longer work, when guilt doesn't move you, when rage doesn't scare you, when withdrawal doesn't shake you, they reach for their most deceptive tactic. They become everything you thought they could be. Yes, I said it. They will become the person you dreamed of on the surface. They'll start speaking your language. They'll acknowledge your pain. They'll bring up the memories, the inside jokes, the good times. They'll mirror your growth, quote your wisdom, say they've changed, say they've seen the light. And for a moment, it will feel like you're being seen. But don't confuse attention with intention. Don't mistake mimicry for transformation, because this is not healing, it's strategy. You see, they're not changing because they finally value you. They're shifting because they're losing their grip on you. And when their mask of intimidation falls, they replace it with the mask of redemption. But masks are masks, and you can only pretend to change for so long. Here's the truth. They study you so they can deceive you. Hey, listen. So they can learn your language and use it against you. They mirror your healing journey not because they're on it too, but because they want you to believe they belong on the same path as you. But remember this, the final test of your growth is not in how loud you can speak truth, but in how quietly you can walk away from a lie, even when it's dressed in everything you wanted. Because when the narcissist pulls this final dirty trick, what they are hoping is this, that your love for potential will blind you to patterns, that your hope for redemption will silence your memory of betrayal, that your compassion will override your discernment. But this is the moment of clarity. This is the divine test. This is when the old version of you would have said, maybe they mean it this time. But the new you, the wiser you, says, I know what peace feels like, and this isn't it. This final trick is not a gift. It's a trap wrapped in hope. It's a false rebirth designed to lead you back into bondage. And if you don't pause and discern, you'll celebrate a new beginning only to find yourself in the same old cycle. How to stay free. One of the most difficult things to accept about healing is that freedom doesn't feel familiar at first. When you've spent years walking on emotional eggshells, when you've been conditioned to ignore your instincts in order to preserve peace, stepping into clarity feels unnerving. You begin to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Did I make a mistake walking away? Was I too harsh? But what you're really feeling is not guilt. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from dysfunction. Withdrawal from the cycle of manipulation that had you doubting your worth at every turn. You must understand that staying free is not just about removing the narcissist. It's about retraining your soul to trust peace over drama. Because when chaos becomes your normal, silence can feel suspicious. When someone constantly disrespected your boundaries, honoring them will feel lonely at first. That's why so many go back, not because it was better, but because it was familiar. But familiarity is not the same as safety. Just because you knew how to survive in the storm doesn't mean you belong in it. Staying free means refusing to argue with someone who twists every word into a weapon. It means declining to meet confusion with explanation. It means letting go of the desire to be understood by someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. It requires choosing truth over connection and valuing peace over proximity. And that choice, though painful at first, is the gate to emotional liberation. But freedom is also responsibility, because once you see the pattern, you're accountable for not repeating it. You cannot unsee what clarity has revealed. You can't pretend someone is kind just because they're soft-spoken. You can't confuse delayed manipulation with patience. You can't call abuse miscommunication anymore. Your discernment has matured. Your emotional intelligence has deepened. And with that wisdom comes the task of stewarding your own heart. You've got to protect your peace the way you once protected their ego. You've got to show up for yourself with the loyalty you once gave away too cheaply. You have to become the guardian of your own soul, because no one else will guard it if you don't. Staying free requires you to disconnect from anything that attempts to redefine who you are through fear, guilt, or shame. It's not enough to escape the cage. You must also destroy the door that led you in. This is the season where your silence is not a punishment, it's preservation. Your boundaries are not revenge, they're reverence for the person you've become. And if someone calls you cold for walking away from toxicity, let them. They never knew your warmth was a gift, not a guarantee. You're not hard, you're healed. You're not bitter, you're building. And you don't owe access to people who once used their proximity to poison your purpose. Rise above it. There is a moment in every person's life where they must choose to stop dancing with dysfunction. Not because they're heartless, but because they've finally seen what the dance costs. You don't rise by fighting petty battles. You rise by refusing to be dragged into them. And when you begin to elevate mentally, emotionally, spiritually, those who benefited from your brokenness will accuse you of arrogance. But don't let that pull you down. Rising doesn't mean you think you're better. It means you now know what you deserve. It means you've chosen to no longer entertain what insults your purpose. You are not running away, you are rising above. That's a different altitude. You're not avoiding conflict. You're choosing alignment. And alignment brings peace, clarity, and consistency. Things that a narcissist cannot live with, but things you can no longer live without. Rising above doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you've decided to transform it. You've decided that your past will be a lesson, not a prison. That your scars will speak of survival, not surrender. And that your story will no longer be edited by someone who tried to silence you when you started telling the truth. Let me tell you something powerful. Just because someone sees your value now doesn't mean they're ready to honor it. Sometimes people only recognize your worth when they no longer have access to it. But don't be flattered by late recognition. If they couldn't see your light when it was shining beside them, they don't deserve to bask in it now that you've taken it elsewhere. The right people don't need to lose you to value you. You rise when you choose not to seek revenge, but instead build a life so full of peace that it speaks for itself. You rise when you bless yourself with the same compassion you tried to give them. You rise when you realize that emotional abuse is not love in disguise, but control in costume. And you rise when you decide that your purpose is too important to keep revisiting the past for closure you already found within. So if they send you messages pretending they've changed, if they bait you with apologies, if they show up talking about how different things could be now, hear it. But don't internalize it. Not everything that looks like closure is meant to be embraced. Sometimes it's just the enemy trying one more time to invite you back into a version of yourself you've outgrown. The climb is not easy, but what's waiting for you at the top is peace. And you'll look back, not in bitterness, but in gratitude, grateful that you finally had the courage to rise, becoming untouchable. Now that you've seen the pattern, now that you've walked through the pain, now that you've felt the pressure of walking away and still choose your peace, you have crossed a line you can never uncross. You've become untouchable, not because you are above others, but because you are finally rooted in truth. You are no longer easily swayed by charm, guilt, or sweet words whispered through bitter mouths. You no longer get pulled by empty promises or manipulated by the illusion of change. You've seen too much, you've grown too much, you've healed too far. And here's what you must understand. The narcissist's final dirty trick wasn't about reconnection. It was a test of your transformation. It wasn't about them. It was about you. Could the old trigger still reach you? Could the old pattern still hold you? Could the old story still bind you? And your answer, your silence, your peace, your boundaries became your testimony. You didn't respond with war. You responded with stillness. You didn't lower your frequency. You raised your standard. That is true power. Power is not in how loud you can defend yourself. It's in how quietly you can walk away without needing to be understood. Power is not in the revenge you could take. It's in the peace you protect instead. You learn that love does not manipulate. That peace is not something you beg for. It is something you build within. That healing is not about fixing someone else. It's about restoring yourself. So now you rise, not as someone escaping pain, but as someone who turned pain into purpose. You rise, not bitter, but better. You rise not to prove something to them, but to prove something to you, that you are no longer available for the things that once broke you. From now on, you don't shrink to be loved. You don't negotiate your worth to be chosen. You don't dim your light so others don't feel small. From now on, you walk in truth, in strength, in clarity, in peace. And no matter how many tricks they try, you've already passed the test. You're free now, and there's no turning back.